and let there be light. Ah! Hey guys, welcome to Elevated Systems. I'm your host CJ, and today we're getting back to this. Now, for those of you new to the channel, you might not recognize this as I have all the panels removed, but this is my custom modded Lian Lancool 2 mesh, and today I'm gonna finish up all the case prep and modding, getting it to the point where I can finally get all the components in the case and finish this build. So today I'll be adding some custom addressable RGB strips, which is the focus of this video, and then I need to get the case fans installed and wired up, but like everything on this build, I need to mod the fans first. I'll get to that, but first let's go over the plan for the RGB. And that plan is to actually measure the spots I want the RGB strips and then cut those strips to size from some bulk ARGB, wire them up, diffuse the lights, and get them all installed and neatly cable managed. Now, before I get to the how to do all this, I guess I should go into the why. First is customization. While you can buy individual RGB strips, they come in pretty standard lengths. 12 inches, 16 inches, 18 inches. But if I want, say, a 13-inch piece that fits up here in the top of the case, it's not really available. I'd have to buy a longer segment and extend it down the side of the case maybe, or I could cut the last few inches off if the cut spacing lined up. And now how about the 42-inch piece that I want back here? For that, I need at least 3 strips that I'd need to connect together, which means more wires to manage and hide somehow. Speaking of the cables, in most cases, those are ugly, not sleeved, multicolored, and have weird connectors. The second reason is cost. I'm gonna put about 7 feet of RGB strips in here. That'll cost about $40 for the 60 LED per meter strips. I'm gonna do it for half that. And I guess finally, because customizing PCs cheaply and easily, and more importantly, teaching y'all how to do that is, well, what I do. So let's do this. First, let's go over the stuff you need to accomplish this. And of course, first is the RGB strip. And this is a 5 meter or 16.4 foot, 5-volt addressable RGB strip from Alatove. And I picked this up for $29-30, and I like this one because it's dense, as in there are 60 LEDs per meter. There are also 60 cut points per meter, so it can be cut between every individual LED. This brand also comes in white or black PCB to match your particular build. I also have 5 meters of silicone LED diffuser channel and a 5-volt RGB hub I'll be using to connect all the RGB in the system to. I have some 22 gauge wire, some DuPont pins and housings, some cable sleeving, double-sided mounting tape, some heat shrink. For tools, I have a pair of scissors, some side cutters, a pair of auto wire strippers, and some crimpers. And then I have my rework station for soldering and the heat gun, and finally a set of helping hands. I'll put links to all of this in the description below. I also have a Raspberry Pi set up over here to test the strips before I install them into the case. Okay, now before I get started on the actual construction of the LED strips, I guess I should go over some of the characteristics of this and basically every ARGB light strip. First, this is 5-volt 3-pin addressable RGB, not 12-volt 4-pin LED lighting. So to use it, you need either a 3-pin RGB header on your motherboard or some type of 5-volt ARGB controller. The 3 pins or leads on these strips include the 5-volt power, ground, and data. Unlike 12-volt LED lights that basically modulates the voltage to each red, green, and blue pixel on the LED to adjust the intensity of those pixels, resulting in different colors, ARGB works by sending a data signal to the control chip on each LED. That control chip adjusts the intensity of the 3 pixels on each LED, resulting in different colors. What's important to know is that data signal only goes in one direction as indicated by the arrow on the PCB. So you have to pay attention to which side of the strip you connect your input to. Also, a typical 3-pin ARGB motherboard header maxes at about 3 amps, and each LED on this strip can pull up to 60 milliamps. So that means things can get wonky after about 50 LEDs. But unlike the data signal, you can inject power at any point along the strip to overcome the voltage fall off. I'll demonstrate this when I make the 3.5 foot strip. Okay, enough talk, let's start making. And I'll start with a simple strip for the top of the case here, from the rear panel to the I/O assembly. Okay, so first I'm just gonna measure that out. That looks to be about 14 inches. So let's measure out 14 inches, which lands about here. That's why I like this particular strip with the cut points between every LED. Some have these cut points spaced out every 2, 3, or even 6 LEDs, which makes it more difficult to get the exact lengths. Now, to cut this, you want to cut right on this line that's in the middle of these solder pads. Now, if you're a beginner to soldering, you can cut at the bottom of the pad to give yourself more room. This will just mean you won't be able to use this next one LED here, so you can just cut that off again at the bottom of that solder pad. But I'm not gonna sacrifice the LED today. Okay, so there's my 14-inch strip. I'll just double check that it's gonna fit where I want it to. Perfect. All right, next is the wire. And for this one, to keep the wires clean and not have to run them down the inside of the case somewhere, I'm just gonna run them and splice them into one of the front fan RGB cables that'll eventually be installed here. So I'm gonna get 3 wires to length. All right, now I'm gonna use my stripper to just strip a small piece of insulation off the end of each of the wires. All right, now I'm gonna prep my wire and my solder pad by what's known as tinning or pre-soldering, putting a bead of solder down on each of them first. Now I have this really nice thin rosin core electrical solder. This has the flux basically built into the middle of this. I don't need to add additional flux to anything. And to do this, with as hot as I can get my rework station, I wanna quickly lay down just a bead of solder on each of these pads. I'm also gonna do the same for this wire. Now it'll be easy to just melt the 2 solder points together. All right, and there we go. You don't have to be afraid of soldering. It's actually a very easy process. I'm gonna strip again the ends of each of these. And then I'm gonna build my connector. And what I'm gonna use are these DuPont housings and pins. So I just want a 4x4 housing. If I have any of those left, there's a 4x4 housing. And then my female DuPont pins. Now I went pretty in depth about these DuPont pins and connectors in my how to rewire a PC case video. So I'll link that here and in the description below if you want to check that out for more detail. But basically what I'm going to do is just crimp these pins. I'm going to start by pre-crimping. So now what I want to do is cut myself a piece of sleeving. Okay. Got my wires, I got my cable sleeving cut to size. Now just there's a couple of quick tricks to make sure this goes pretty easy. Another couple of supplies I guess I should bring to the table are a couple of paint pens. So I got my green paint pen and I got my red paint pen, because once I put these wires through this sleeving, it's going to be hard to figure out which one's which. They're all going to be bunched together. So what I want to do, grab my voltage line. This is the 5-volt voltage line. And I'm just going to mark the end of that with some red. And then my data line, the middle one, I'm going to mark at the end. I'm going to mark with some green here. All right, next little trick. Since I have my pins on the end of all these, to get it through the sleeving, I'm going to take just a piece of 3/16 heat shrink, put it over those pins, and then just shrink it down so those pins don't get caught in that nylon sleeving. Now I can easily slide that sleeving over this cable. Now for the LED end, I have this clear heat shrink that I'm gonna use on this end so I don't cover that first LED. Now I can remove that little piece of heat shrink I put on there. And before I add the housing, what I want to do is first take a 1/4 inch piece of heat shrink and slide it over. Then a small section of 3/8. Okay. And now I'm ready. So I want to start with that 5-volt line. And I'm gonna slide that into my housing on point number 1. And that's a little hole with the arrow on it. I always put my voltage on the arrow, so I always know which pin is my 5 volts, okay? And then next, I'm gonna pin this out exactly how my Asus motherboard is pinned on the ARGB header. So the next one is right next to my voltage is my data, the green. And then I'm gonna skip one, and then my ground. So now I can take that 3/8 section and I can put it right over the housing there. Shrink it down. And then take that 1/4 inch and put it right over the end of that one. Shrink that down. And that is it. Now because this strip is short enough, I don't have to inject power along the strip. There's only like 20, 21 LEDs there. I'm not gonna get enough voltage drop off, but let's just test that out. Now on my Raspberry Pi, I will run my test. And it's okay, looks like it. Running through red, green, blue. The next one should be the real test. That should be white. That means all the LEDs are engaged and it looks like they're white all the way across. That's good. No yellow or orange. Yellow. Now I'll hit the fast forward button. That's the brightest, the most intense white right there. I got some patterns and color cycle. Okay. Now I want to add my diffuser. So these things are pretty neat. Now this short strip should just slide right through into the channel. But if you have a longer section, there's a little string that runs all the way through. You can connect that string to one side to your RGB and you can actually pull it through if you need to, but this one should slide right in. Now I guess I can show you what a diffuser looks like. Now this doesn't completely diffuse the light. It's not a really thick diffusion layer, but it does soften it quite a bit so you don't get those really hot spots. So that's it. I don't know how well that shows up on camera, but it does diffuse the light somewhat and gives it a nice softer glow, especially when it's up in a case. Speaking of up in the case, let's get it up in the case. Okay, more tips before applying double-sided mounting tape to everything. clean the surface. I have these little alcohol prep, so I'm gonna clean the surface of this silicone diffuser. And I'm gonna clean the surface of the case where I'm gonna mount this. And there we go. I have a perfectly sized, well-hidden, diffused RGB strip. All right, so I'm gonna take you through that just one more time with this long strip that I have to put in here that'll light up the whole rear of the case. The only difference with this one, I'll be injecting power on both sides of the strip, and I'm gonna show you how that works. But if you don't need to see me wire and solder and everything all over again, I put plenty of time codes in my video, so feel free to skip around to any point that might interest you. Okay, first things first, let me measure this out, and this time I'm just gonna go ahead and use the RGB itself to measure out exactly what I need. All right, now what I'm gonna do on the other side is I'm just gonna add a wire to the 5-volt in the ground. Okay, now what I'm gonna do with this big jumble mess of wires, I'm going to pin the 5-volt on this side together with the 5-volt on this side with my DuPont pin, and the ground also together, while leaving the data wire just in one direction. So what this will be doing is it'll be actually inserting power, 5-volt power, into both ends of the strip, so that way I have voltage which can run in both directions as opposed to my data which can only run in one direction. That'll make up for any of the voltage drop off I have across this. I don't know, this is over 50 LEDs. So before I start pinning all those wires together, I do want to get it into the diffuser, because once I pin those wires together, it becomes a loop and it won't go into here. I just went ahead really quickly, mounted the RGB strip in place because that makes it easier. I've pinned the two 5 volts together. Now I'm just going to take the 2 ground wires and I'm gonna pin those together here. So what I'm doing is I'm injecting power to both sides of the RGB strip, but I'm injecting the same power. So this will be connected to the same lead on my hub, which is connected to the same SATA power supply anyway. So I'm only injecting 5 volts total into the strip, not a second 5 volts. You don't wanna do that. You wouldn't wanna add 5 volts from one source to one side and 5 volts from another source on another side, because then that's 10 volts, and that's no bueno for LED lights. And then last, I just have this single data lead. And for this one, it's gonna be all completely in the basement, underneath and behind my main cables. So there's really no need to sleeve it. All right, guys, I realize I just filmed that entire segment with my step ladder for my overhead camera, completely blocking the shot. A year into the channel and I'm still making rookie mistakes, but you guys are smart, so you got the gist of it. I installed the RGB strip, I wired it up, and now let's test it out. And let there be light. Okay, it works. Now, I have a few more strips to make and install, but I think you guys get it. Besides, I need to leave some stuff for the final unveil, which is coming up soon. The only thing I have left to do is install the fans, and these are the fans. I have 6 Lian Li Bora digital fans in silver. However, they're black fans and I want white fans. I actually wanted the Lian Li white uni fans, but don't get me started on those completely unavailable things. So for these, I'm gonna have to do this. I have to completely disassemble the fan and then paint the black frame section here white, and sleeve the cables and get the fans installed. These empty spots here are actually for the PWM and RGB cables, so I'm not gonna bore you with that. You've seen me paint things before, and if you haven't, well, the point of this video was to show you how to make your own custom addressable RGB strips. Now, I almost forgot, for those of you who are really not comfortable with the idea of soldering anything, you can buy these cool connector clips with contacts for the 3 copper pads that clip right onto the end of the strip, so there is a solder-free option. But the next time you see this will be the final assembly. I'm consider live streaming the final build. If I have enough interest in that, let me know in the comments if a live stream build is something you'd be interested in seeing. If I have enough interest, maybe I can do a build Q&A type stream. Anyway, that's for another day. Today, I'm done. I hope you learned something. That is why I do what I do. Leave questions below and I'll be sure to answer. Also, if you're not subscribed yet and you want to see how this build turns out, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe.